Alrighty, here we go. Let's see, what do we got here? What do we got here? What are we up to over here? I think we did that off already. Alright. Okay. Alright, that sounds very nice. Alright, that sounds very good. Alright. Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chav Tes, Daf 29 from Masechta Beitzah. That's pretty cool. I'm not sure why, but it is. Well, whatever. So today we're going to learn 3 Mishnayos, all basically continuing on kind of like similar vibes of the past few days, which is like, going to butchers, store owners, all sorts of people trying to chaparah different things on Yom Tif. So, can you measure? Can you weigh? Can you do else? Can you pay? All these kinds of things. But friends, we're also finishing the 3rd parak, the parak of Ein Sodom Dogam and Abivim B'Yom Tif. We're wrapping that up today. So friends, let's jump in. Okay, on the bottom of Chav Ches Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom, says the new Mishnah, Lo Yomar Adam L'Tabach. Okay, so a fellow shouldn't say to a butcher, Shkoli B'Dinar Basar, that measure out for me, or there's a Gauss who says, Mechorli, sell to me meat for a dinar. A dinar being like a current, like a coin, a certain coin. Don't do that, because, obviously we don't discuss, we don't do actual business on Yom Tov. But what he can do is he can slaughter and divide it up among them. Ask the Gemara, Hey Chiyavid, what does this look like? What exactly does it look like, this slaughtering and dividing up? So Kiyade Bisura Amre Tarta Ufalgu Tarta Binarish. Who is in Narish? Okay, how about let's do it like this. Who is in Surah? Who could tell me, friends? Who is in Surah? Who is in Surah? Rav. Rav was in Surah. Rav Huna, Rav Chizda, they were in Surah. Something maybe just threw into my throat. I don't know, maybe something threw into my throat. I'm not sure. Honestly, if it was a mosquito, I wouldn't really mind. I don't know, what would you guys rather a mosquito, like, what would you rather accidentally swallowing a mosquito, but that it's like done and like not going to bother you anymore? Or like, not swallow it, because I can understand why you wouldn't want to, but then you got to deal with it. Friends, it's what we call between a rock and a hard place. So Rav Huna and Rav Chizda were all in Surah, and there they would say a tarta and a half a tarta. Okay, let's talk about that in a minute. But Narish, friends, who is in Narish? I believe Rav Papa and Rav Huna Beit Rav Yoshua were in Narish. So in Narish, they would say Amri Chalka Ufalga Chalka. Okay. But Pumbedisa, who is in Pumbedisa, friends? Rav Yehuda, Rabba, Rav Yosef, Abaye, maybe even Rava Shtickle. So they were in Pumbedisa. Amri Uzia Ufalga Uzia. Benar Pakud. Who in the world was in Nar Pakud? I feel like there was somebody from Nar Pakud. That I don't know who is in Nar Pakud, but we also say Uvmata Mechasya. Who is in Mata Mechasya? Ravashi. Ami Riva Ufalga Riva. Okay. So we have these different locations and they would say different things. What's the point? The point is that the butcher would take the animal and he would divide it up into equal portions. So then, once they divided it up into equal portions, they would be able to say, look, I want, 2 portions, I want half a portion, 1 portion, whatever it might be. So that's how they would weigh it out. And there was just technicalities. In Surah, it was called a tarta. In Irish, they would call this portion a chalka. In Pumbedisa, they would call it an uzia. In Nar Pakud and Matam Chas, they would call it a riva. What do you want me to tell you? But, alright. This is how they would do it, and they don't mention any money, and that was acceptable. Says the new Mishnah, Omer Adam lachaveru, a fellow could say to his friend. Rashi changes it to the Gauss Tudim changes it to chenvani. It's like a store owner. Okay, malili klize avalo b'mida. The Gemara is going to have to explain what this means, but the Tanakama says that you're allowed to say to the store owner, essentially, fill me up this vessel, but you can't give him like a measuring cup. You can't really quite do that. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda, im haya kli shel mida lo yimalena. If it was a kli shalmida, again, the Gemara is going to have to explain what it is, then you can't use it. Okay, fine. Ma'aseh Abba Shaul ben Botnis. There was a story with Abba Shaul ben Botnis, midosav be'erev Yom Tov, that he would fill up his measures. He was a merchant, but he was also Talmid Chacham. So he would fill up his merchants, his vessels, his measures on erev Yom Tov, v'nosnu l'kuchas b'Yom Tov, and then on Yom Tov he would have these vessels that were already filled up, that were already prepared, and he would be able to just kind of give them like that without filling them up on Yom Tov. Okay, Abba Shaul says that even during the Chol HaMoed, Abba Shaul ben Botnis would do this. Because of the Beirurei Amidos, there's different Gersos that don't have that, but what Beirurei Amidos are the foam. Very, very interesting. That meaning when you would pour wine into whatever vessel it was, so there would be foam at the top, and that foam takes up space. So you're basically paying for foam, and he wouldn't want people to have to pay for foam. So he would prepare the measures in advance and let the foam settle and fill it up properly. And then when people wanted to get some, he would just be able to give it to them without, I guess on Chol HaMoed if they were going to buy it. So then it would be a full measure. There wouldn't be any foam in there because the foam was already taken care of. Okay, the Chacham say that even during the week, meaning not on, I don't know, either, I guess just on any regular day because of Mitzui Amidos. Mitzui Amidos is kind of the opposite, which is if you would take like oil, let's say, and then let's say somebody would want to buy oil, and then they would give him like a vessel to fill up with oil. So when he's pouring the oil into their vessel, so then, he's not quite, if he fills up like, let's say, I don't know, a cup of oil and he pours it into their vessel, well, it's not really going to be quite a cup because some of the oil, I think viscous, is that the right word? But it's going to like take a while to kind of drip out completely from the cup. So they're not really getting a full cup until it all drips out. So in order to prevent all the dripping, I guess he would already, when people would give them their vessels, I guess he would let the oil drip like overnight or something so that whatever they could ultimately take away is the full measure, although I wonder if people probably just want their oil. I don't know if they want to necessarily wait the next day to get their oil, but whatever it is. Okay. The point being that Abba Shaul ben Botnis was a very honest businessman. He wouldn't want you to get any less than you are supposed to get. So my Ava lo b'midah. Okay, so now we have to figure out what does this mean, right? The Mishnah had said, the Tanna Kama said that a fellow could say to like the shopkeeper, Maleh li kli zeh ava lo b'midah. Can you fill up this vessel for me, but not a measuring cup? What does this mean? Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel says, Yehuda Amar Shmuel, avalo b'chli hamiyuchad lemida. That you're not allowed to use a vessel like that's specific for measuring. So you could take epis, take a cup or something, like not a measuring cup, but like a regular cup or whatever it is, a bowl, whatever it might be. You can give that to the shopkeeper and say, hey, can you fill me up this vessel? That's fine. But don't give like a measuring cup and say, hey, can you fill up this measuring cup? That is not okay. But a vessel that is sort of a backup measuring cup, i.e. it's a measuring cup that has never actually been used yet as a measuring cup, so then you would be able to use that. Rabbi Yehuda comes to say, so that was the Tanna Kama, who says that you're allowed to use a regular vessel, you're not allowed to use a measuring cup, but you are allowed to use a backup measuring cup, and Rabbi Yehuda is stringent, and he says, Afilu kliya omid lemida lo yumalenu, that even this backup measuring cup you shouldn't use for filling up to fill it up with contents on Yom Tov. So interestingly, what do we see? We see that over here when it comes to Simchas Yom Tov, procuring, let's say, wine or something. So the Tanna Kama is saying that you're not allowed to use a proper measuring cup, but you can use a backup measuring cup. Tanna Kama has no problem with that. Rabbi Yehuda says no, you cannot use a backup measuring cup. So we see that when it comes to Simchas Yom Tov, Rabbi Yehuda is the one being stringent, and the Chacham are being lenient over here. But one second, in the previous Mishnah, well, actually probably 2 Mishnahs ago, we hear the opposite, which is the Tananas. We learned in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda, my friends, what does Rabbi Yehuda say? Shokel Adam Basar Keneged Akli Keneged Akupitz. Rabbi Yehuda says that you're allowed to weigh meat, and with the counterweight, you can use some kind of a vessel, or you can use a cleaver for a counterweight. Just don't use like a regular weight. Whereas the rabbis say you're not allowed to use a scale on Yom Tov whatsoever. Alma. So what do we see from there? Rabbi Yehuda Lekula, Rabbi Yehuda, who says that you're allowed to use as a counterweight a vessel or a cleaver, he's being lenient. V'Rabbanan, the rabbis who say don't go near a scale on Yom Tov whatsoever, lechumra, they're being stringent. Kasha Rabbi Yehuda ad Rabbi Yehuda, kasha Rabbanan ad Rabbanan. Friends, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Friends, what do we do? Who could tell me? On the one hand, over here, Rabbi Yehuda is being stringent, but in 2 Mishnahs ago, he was being lenient. The Rabbanan over here are being lenient. 2 Mishnahs ago, they're being stringent. Oh, topsy-turvy reality. Rabbi Yehuda ad Rabbi Yehuda lo kasha. Don't worry about Rabbi Yehuda, we can answer it. Hasun b'sheno omed lemida, hacha b'omed lemida. He says, look, it's different. What's Rabbi Yehuda saying over here? Rabbi Yehuda is saying over here that you have a vessel that's a backup measuring vessel. It's a regular measuring vessel. It just hasn't been used yet. But it's a regular measuring vessel. So that's why you're not that's why you can't use it on Yom Tov. But in the previous case, we're not talking about, something that's like specific that's going to be used for measuring. In the first case, using some kind of a vessel or a cleaver as a counterweight. Therefore, he has no problem with that. Also, it's no problem with the rabbis. That in the previous example, when they said don't go near a scale on Yom Tov, yeah, because you use scales during the week. We don't want you on Yom Tov weighing things out at all. Whereas over here, when it comes to using some kind of vessel that you wouldn't necessarily use during the week, whether it's some kind of vessel or whether it's a backup measuring vessel that has never actually been used for measuring. I mean, these aren't the things that you would this isn't the way that you would normally do it during the week, and therefore it's acceptable according to the rabbis. So you can explain according to Rabbi Yehuda and according to the rabbis why they would hold their respective positions in both Mishnayos. Rava Amar, Mai avalo b'mida, shelo yizkor lo shem mida. Rava says that what's this whole avalo b'mida thing? Don't mention how much of an amount you want. So when the Mishnah says that according to the Tanakama, Omer Adam l'chaver madli klize, can you fill up this vessel for me? Avalo b'mida. Say, can you fill up this vessel, but don't say how much is the vessel. Don't say, look, I want a cup of wine. Don't say that. Well, meaning a cup if we're talking about the official thing. Why don't we say like a gallon? I don't know, a gallon seems like a lot, but okay, a lot sounds nice. It's Yom Tov. So it says, Rav, don't go over to the guy and say, I want to, give me a gallon of wine. Don't say that, but you could say, fill up this vessel. Don't say how what the quantity. But even if you have a vessel that is set aside, that is a normal measuring kind of cup, who cares? As long as you don't mention how, a particular quantity, you could say, hey, can you just fill this up for me? Doesn't matter if it's technically a measuring cup or not. Rabbi Yehuda says to say, look, if it's a measuring cup, I don't want you using it. According to the Tanakhama, they said, look, I don't care if it's a measuring cup. just don't say how much exactly you want. Rabbi Yehuda says, look, if it's a measuring cup, you can't use it. So again, same thing as we said before. We see that over here, when it comes to Simchas Yom Tov, enjoying Yom Tov, Samachta b'chagecha. Rabbi Yehuda is being stringent, saying that you're not allowed to use a measuring cup. The rabbis are being lenient and saying, look, just don't mention how much you want. But in the 2 Mishnahs ago, we saw the opposite. The Tananas, we learned in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda is being lenient, and he says that you can weigh meat using a vessel or a cleaver as a counterweight. As the rabbis say, you're not allowed to go near a scale whatsoever, so they're being stringent. So in that other Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda is being lenient, and the rabbis are being stringent. Rabbi Yehuda is contradicting himself, and the rabbis are contradicting themselves. So the Gemara says, no, don't worry about it. Rabbi Yehuda is not contradicting himself. Hosum, when it comes to weighing the meat with a vessel or a cleaver as a counterweight, Like he said in the previous time that we had this. Over there, the vessel and the cleaver are not specific for weighing and measuring. So therefore it's okay. Whereas over here, he's saying you're not allowed to use a measuring cup because it's specific for measuring. I can also explain the rabbis when it comes to using a scale to weigh meat on Yom Tov, that's a regular way to do things. Whereas over here, this is not the normal way that you do it during the week. That if you're giving wine to like a friend, then you might just fill up a cup and give it to him. But if you're ordering it, if you're buying it from a shopkeeper, you're going to say, hey, I want a gallon of wine, or I want a pint of wine. A pint is like a thing. A pint is much less than a gallon though. What's a quart? I don't know. Buy whatever they sell, you buy. It doesn't really matter. As long as you can get what you want. That's my opinion anyways. Where were we? So according to the rabbis, what were they saying? So where are we? Who am I? So according to the rabbis, so they had said, look, the normal way to sell meat and buy meat is with the scale. So therefore it's not allowed. But over here, then it is not the normal way to say, hey, just give me some wine. No, you're going to tell them how much the normal quantity is. If you give your friend just a cup of wine or something like that, nobody's asking how much is it exactly. When you buy it, you generally buy a specific amount, which we're not doing over here. So therefore the rabbis say, it is okay. So now the Mishnah had said that there was a story with Abba Shaul ben Botnis that he prepared the measures already from Erev Yom Tov. Tana apamoid osakein mipnei bitol beis hamedrash. Oh, so we had mentioned in the Mishnah that even during Chol HaMoed, he would also fill up the vessels in advance so that the foam wouldn't be taking up, the people wouldn't be paying for foam. So he would, do it in advance and make sure that everyone's getting the proper amount that they're paying for. We have a Beitzah that says that on Chol HaMoed, Abba Shaul ben Botnos would prepare the measures in advance so that he can go to the Beis HaMedrash. As Rashi points out, that on Chol HaMoed, the Olam has more time, they're able to study Torah, and therefore he wanted to be available in the Beis HaMedrash. So therefore, in order to spend more time in the Beis HaMedrash, he would prepare the measures in advance, as Rashi says, "Vayimamalan balayla she'ein zman Beis HaMedrash." Interesting, that he would fill up the wine at night. He would fill up the measures at night because that's not a time of Beis HaMedrash, which is interesting. I would think that at night people are learning. Maybe Dafka on Sukkot, because people are enjoying themselves at a Simchas Beis HaShoeva. Did you guys go to Simchas Beis HaShoevas? A friend of mine invited me to one. I think he thought I was going to come. I don't know. Do you think he really thought I was going to come? I don't know. I don't go anywhere. It's far away. I thought it was funny that he thought I would come. Yeah, I wonder why he did. Alright, let's go weiter. Alright. So even during Chol HaMoed, he thought, I was joking about it with a different friend, right? And I thought it was funny that he invited me. Alright. Very nice. It's good to have fun, I guess. Alright, let's go weiter. So you would do it during the Chol HaMoed also, that he would set up the measures in advance so that he could be available in the Beis HaMedrash. Fine. Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, Hu konas shloshmeus garve yayin mi beruri amidos. He collected 300 garbes of wine because of the foam. V'chaverev konsu shloshmeus garbe shemen mi mitzu amidos. And his friends collected 300 garbes of oil because of the mitzu amidos, all of the oil that kind of drips out afterwards. Okay, what does this mean, friends? It's very interesting, actually. I mean, imagine you have a barrel of wine, and the barrel of wine is, let's say, 100 gallons. I'm making it up, right? So let's say it's 100 gallons. So let's say you sell the wine by the gallon. So memela, that means that after I sell 100 gallons of wine, there shouldn't be any wine left in the barrel, right? But what would happen is that it's not the case, because as we said before, because of the foam and all of that, so what ends up happening is that 1 gallon is actually a little bit less than a gallon because of the foam and stuff. So we had said in the Mishnah that he would go out of his way to try to prevent this foam situation, whatever it is. But basically, Abba Shol ben Botnis, when he would get to the end of the barrel and he would, let's say, sell all 100 gallons of wine and somehow there was still some wine left over, which means that memele, some people didn't get as much wine as they should have. So he didn't want to take advantage of that. He didn't want to say, okay, gewaldig, well, this is for me. No, he didn't say that. And the same thing with his friends when they had oil, right? Again, let's say they had 100 gallons of oil and they would sell it by the gallon. So they would pour out the oil into other people's vessels, but some of the oil would still be stuck to the sides of the vessel that he's pouring, the gallon vessel that he's pouring from. And at the end, after they sold 100 gallons of oil, there will still be some left over. So what did they do with this? They didn't want to keep it for themselves. They felt it wasn't right. This is really, people had really paid for this. Even if it's just a small amount. I imagine that it's probably small enough that it's not considered theft, but at the same time, they didn't want to keep it for themselves. So they said, you know what? Why don't we bring it to the Beitzah Hamikdash? We'll give it to the temple treasury. We'll donate it. They came to Yerushalayim, and the treasurer said to them, you don't need to do this. It's not considered stealing. Don't worry about it. Enjoy it. Look, we don't want it. We didn't have any, this was not our intention to have anything left over. It really belongs to the people who bought it. We don't want it. We know it's not stealing, but we still don't want it. So the treasurers said to Abba Shol ben Botnis and his friends, he said, look, because you're being stringent, asumeim tzorkei rabim, use it for the use this extra, I guess, money or whatever it is for the needs for public needs. The Tanya, as we learned in a Beitzah, Gazel ve'enu yodea lemi gazel, that if a fellow steals and he doesn't know who he stole from, yaisu b'hem tzorkei rabim, at least put the proceeds to benefit the public. Ma'ininu, how do you benefit the public? Omer Rav Chizda boro shichnu mayris, making pits and ditches and caves, places where people could get water and things like that. So they would, so the temple treasury said, why don't you put the extra proceeds that you have towards public benefit? Says the Gemara, Adbe Rav Chizda l'Ravna ukva v'dorash. So Rav Chizda took Ravna ukva for a walk, and he said, a person shouldn't measure barley and put it in front of his animal on Yom Tov, because that's kind of the normal way he would do it. But what he can do is he can take a kav or a kabayim, like this cup or whatever, this measure, and he can dip it into the barley and then pour that in front of the animal. Meaning, I guess the normal way that they would fill up a measure of barley is they would use their hands to fill it up. So what Rav Chizda is suggesting, don't use your hands, but just hold the cup and dip it into the barley and fill it up that way. Alright. There also, and a baker or a cook can measure spices and put it into his pot, so it won't burn. Tavshilos, that is, cooking stuff doesn't burn. Alright. A woman is allowed to measure flour on Yom Tov and put it into her dough. They should titol challah b'ayin yofa, such she'll separate challah, in a gracious kind of manner. Meaning, because if she doesn't measure how much flour she's putting into the dough, so then she won't know exactly, right? So challah is 1/24th, so she won't know exactly what that is, and she might end up, under separating the challah, not separating enough. So therefore, we're saying she's allowed to measure it so she'll know how much she's working with, so that she can separate challah properly. Ushmuel Amar Osir. Shmuel says that no, she's not allowed to. She's not allowed to measure the flour. All right. V'Tana Devei Shmuel mutter, but it was Tana in the Tana Devei Shmuel. It says mutter. What's the Tana Devei Shmuel? So it says Rashi. It's extremely, extremely interesting. It says Rashi, the second to last Rashi on the page, B'Tosefta Shesider Shmuel, that Shmuel apparently organized some kind of a Tosefta, Mitanoim Shelefanov, which was like a compilation from earlier Tanoim. Shmuel was like one of the first Amoraim. So he made a compilation of brises from different Tanoim from the earlier generations. K'mo shesidru Reb Chiyav Reb Oshaya, u'chmo shesider Rebbe Yis HaMishnah. Friends, is this not fascinating? That just like Rebbe made the Mishnah, friends, this is absolutely fascinating. Rebbe, of course, edited the Mishnayos, right? And that's the Mishnah that we have. That's very authoritative. Now, Brises are basically, kind of like Mishnayos, but they're, from Tanoim, but they just didn't make it into the text that Rebbe organized. So all these other kind of Brises from, the Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Meir, all the Tanoim. So those are sort of these Brises. Now, there's Brises and there's Brises, right? There was, right, Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Oshaya. So they organized what's called the Tosefta. And as we've seen a few times, Toseftas are like the authoritative Brises, right? Like every so often you'll see in the Gemara, there's like a random Brisa and the Gemara will say, like, how do we know that we could trust this Brisa? It's not authoritative. How do we know that it's a real Brisa? So we have the Mishnayos, which is what Rebbe organized, and that, a Mishnah is even though Mishnayos and Brises and all Tanoim have like, equal sort of clout and level and they can argue with each other, but still there is a certain preference and deference to Mishnayos over Brises, and even within Brises there's a Tosefta which was, those are authoritative. They're like, vouched for by Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Oshaya who organized it into the Tosefta. But apparently what we're seeing over here is that Shmuel had his own Tosefta. Shmuel had his own compilation of Brises, which is of, interesting to the utmost degree. Wow. So anyways, V'tana Devei Shmuel, and it was taught in this Tosefta of Shmuel, mutter, like Rav, that a woman would be allowed to separate this flour and use it for her bread, her dough. So now that Shmuel himself says it's not allowed, but in his Tosefta he says it is allowed, what does this mean? So Shmuel, when he paskins that it's not allowed, because he doesn't want people to maybe make mistakes and end up we don't want people necessarily just measuring in the same way that they do like during the week. But so that's what Shmuel would pass in halacha l'maisa. But technically speaking, you are allowed, a woman would be, and I imagine a man for that matter, would be allowed to measure out flour for their bread. Super interesting. It's another one of those like halacha vein morin kain situations like we had yesterday. That meaning technically speaking, the halacha is that you'd be allowed to measure this flour. However, Shmuel didn't feel comfortable paskening and letting it be known to everybody that this in fact is permitted. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in shonin kemach b'yom tiv. All right, you're not allowed to like re-sift flour. I guess I don't know much about flour. I don't know much about sifting flour, and I certainly don't know much about re-sifting flour. But I'll read this for anybody who may know more information. And friends, you can always, if you know about re-sifting flour and you want to share it with the rest of the olam, we got our little WhatsApp chevra. Okay. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, in shonin kemach b'yom tiv, you can't sift flour on Yom Tiv. Mishum Reb Papias v'Reb Yehuda ben Beseira amru shonin. So Reb Papias and Reb Yehuda ben Beseira says you are allowed to re-sift flour. V'shav, and everybody agrees, Shem nafal l'sochon tzura kesam. Everyone agrees that if a like pebble or a wood chip falls into the flour, sheshonin, that then you could sift. All right. Tanitana Kama to Ravina, a certain teacher of Brises taught in front of Ravina, in shonin kemach b'yom tiv, you can't re-sift flour on Yom Tiv aval, but nafal tzora kesam. But if a pebble or a wood chip fell into the flour, borer b'yaldo, you could just grab it, take it out. Omerle, Ravina responded, he said to this teacher, Kol shekain da'aser. What do you mean? Of course that's not allowed. Davlik borer. That's just like regular selecting borer, which is an av malacha on Shabbos, so you can't do that. Darish Rava by Rav Huna Zuti a pischa denarda. So Rava by Rav Huna Zuti, he darshaned by the entranceway of Narda. Narda, of course, we were talking about Surah earlier. Narda is where Shmuel was, where Rav Nachman was. Shonin kemach b'yom tiv, and Rava bar Rav Huna Zuti said that we are allowed to re-sift flour on Yom Tov. Rav Nachman said to them, Poku va'amri le la'aba, go and tell our friend, shkilativusech ushdiachizrei, go and take all this greatness that you just expounded, that wow, you are allowed to re-sift flour on Yom Tov and throw it to the thorns. Go see how many sifters are around in Arda. Meaning Rav Nachman was saying, wow, look at you and your big chiddush. You're not telling anybody anything new. We all know this already. Go out and you'll see how many people are sifting flour. You're allowed to re-sift flour on Yom Tov. Of Yosef Noala Kimcha Agaba de Mahulta. The wife of Rav Yosef. Who's Rav Yosef's wife? I don't know. Rav Yosef's wife, she was sifting flour on sort of the back of the sifter. Omar le, right, because she wanted to make some kind of like a shinoi, to do it slightly differently. Omar la, Rav Yosef said to her, Chazi da anarifta ma'ayu sabayina. He says, look, I would like some really good top of the line bread. I understand this to mean that Kili was saying, look, you don't need to use a shinoi. We could just do it the normal way. That will make really good geshmaka bread. Tevisu de Rav Ashi, the wife of Rav Ashi, Noala Kimcha Agava de Bsora, she was sifting flour on the back of like the table. I don't know, somehow on the table she was able to like sift flour. I don't know. Amar Vashi said, Rav Ashi Adidon Barte de Rami Bar Chama. He says, look, my wife is the daughter of Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama Mari de Uvdahava. And Rami Bar Chama was somebody with exceptional midos. Vilav de Chazim Beinosha Lo Avada. And if not for the fact that she saw in her father's house, meaning he was an amazing person, and therefore if she was sifting the flour with some kind of a shinoi, like on the back of the table, so then she must have seen this, she must have learned this from her father, Rami Bar Chama, who was a great person, and therefore it must be that you should really sift flour with a shinoi. All right. Says the next Mishnah, a fellow can go to a shopkeeper who he's familiar with, and say to the shopkeeper, Tainli Beitzim ve'egozim b'minyan, give me a number of eggs, give me a number of nuts, shekender balabais lios mone b'sor peso, because I guess that's sort of like a normal way to kind of count stuff. All right. Tanar Rabbanan, the rabbi said in the Gemara, a fellow can go to a shepherd who he's got like a relationship with. Can you give me one goat? Or one sheep? You can go to a butcher who you're friendly with, you're familiar with, you're regular with, accustomed with. Kaf achas or yarich achas, and say, give me a shoulder or give me a thigh. By a fattener that he is familiar with. And he says to him, Tainli tor echod, give me one ox, or gozel echod, or a bird. Eitzel nachtom harogel etzel, you can go to a baker that you're familiar with. Tainli kikar echod, give me one loaf of bread, or gluska achas, or one type of a dough, I think. Maybe a roll. Eitzel chenvenu harogel etzlo, and by somebody, a shopkeeper who he's accustomed to being with. And he says to him, Tainli esrim beitzim, give me 20 eggs. Didn't they know about dozens? They didn't do dozens back then? O chamishim agozim, or 50 nuts. Asara forsaken, 10 peaches. Lachamish rimonim, 5 pomegranates, v'esrig echad, and esrig. V'vachal yaskilo skum mida. Just don't say like an amount. Reb Shimon ben Elazar, or v'vachal yaskilo skum mekach. Shimon ben Elazar says, as long as you don't mention a price. So kilu, you could say, look, just give me, one this, give me some 10 nuts, give me a few peaches. You could do that, but don't make it like a whole business transaction. That's something that we wouldn't want you to be doing on Yom Tif. Okay, so don't mention a certain price or like a certain amount, like as Rashi says, a kav or a kabayim, but say, look, one chicken, can you give me one chicken or something? And that would be acceptable. Alright, friends, well that was Daf Chav Tes of Masechta Beitzah. We saw 3 Mishnayos today, about how we talked at the beginning and the end about how you don't want to like mention specific prices and things when it comes to buying things, procuring things on Yom Tif. Then we got to the second Mishnah, which said like how exactly you can ask a shopkeeper to kind of fill up stuff for you on Yom Tif. So like we had kind of two ways to understand it. One was that according to the Tanna Kama, you shouldn't you can use a regular vessel, but you shouldn't use like a measuring cup. But you can use like a backup measuring cup. Rabbi Yehuda says you cannot use a backup measuring cup. Okay, the second way to understand it is that according to the Tanna Kama, you can use whatever cup you want, but just don't say like I want like a gallon or something. Don't give a specific amount. Rabbi Yehuda says you're not even allowed to use a measuring cup at all. The question was, well, wasn't Rabbi Yehuda being more lenient earlier? Now he's being more stringent. The rabbis were being more stringent earlier. Now they're being more lenient. What's going on? So we kind of were able to answer it with particular kimtas. We learned about Abu Shol ben Botnis, who him and his friends were very specific. They were very medactic to make sure that what they were selling, what people were paying for, they were getting the utmost. And whenever there would be like leftover wine that they thought, that they hoped they would have, sold it properly. So they would kind of invest it in public good. All right, fine. We talked about re-sifting flour on Yom Tov. It sounds like, maybe the best thing to do would be to do it with a shinoi. That would be okay. All right, sounds like fun stuff. Friends, that was Daf Chav Daled Masechta Beitzah. I hope you enjoyed it. Cheers. Did I say Chav Daled? I meant Chav Tes. Peace.